The room was so white it hurt my eyes. A statue art gallery, filled with people pretending to understand sculptures that looked like junk. My wife, Melissa, was laughing. That high, ringing laugh she saved for clients. She was laughing with him. Joshua, all polished teeth and a suit that cost more than my first truck. He looked over at me, his eyes skimming past me like I was part of the waitstaff. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled $5 bill, and tossed it onto the minimalist table between us. "For the help," he said, smirking at Melissa. "Go get yourself a real drink." Melissa didn't defend me. She snickered, a small, sharp sound that cut deeper than the insult. I looked at the bill. My hand was perfectly steady. I reached out, picked up the $5, flattened the creases, folded it once, then twice, and slid it into my pocket. I gave Melissa one last look. She was already turning back to him. So I walked out. That art gallery, it was her world. All white walls, sharp edges, and cold surfaces. My world is the opposite. My world is Ashworth Fine Carpentry. It's a 1,500 square foot workshop that smells like cedar, varnish, and sawdust. It smells like work. I'm a master artisan. I don't just build furniture. I take these massive, rough slabs of rare wood, walnut, cherry, ancient oak, and I find the soul inside them. My hands are stained. My fingernails are permanently packed with grease and varnish. And I love it. I build things that last, things you can touch, things that will be in a family for 100 years. Melissa, my wife. She's a top-tier luxury real estate broker. Her world is all about image. It's about networking, about who you know, about the brand of your suit and the price of your watch. She used to love my hands, used to say they were strong, real. But for the last 10 years, those same hands embarrassed her. "Kevin, can't you shower before you walk in the house?" she'd say, wrinkling her nose. "My clients are coming by, and I can't have the place smelling like labor." She hated the sawdust I tracked in, hated the faint smell of wood stain that clung to me like a second skin. I always thought she was just a snob. But standing there, in that cold gallery with a $5 bill in my pocket, I finally understood. It wasn't just snobbery, it was deeper. For Melissa, her entire self-worth was a reflection. She only knew she was successful if she saw it shining back at her in the eyes of other important people. High net worth clients, rival brokers, people like Joshua, my world, my workshop, my tangible, Kiat success. It was a broken mirror. It didn't give her the reflection she craved. It just showed her a guy with sawdust in his hair. A guy who built things with his hands instead of just making deals. I wasn't a partner. I was an embarrassing prop. And she didn't just resent me for it. She despised me. I was in the workshop until 2 in the morning. I wasn't working. I was cleaning. Methodically. Wiping down the cast iron surface of the table saw, putting my chisels back in their leather roll. Sharpening blades that were already sharp. There's a comfort in it. Taking chaos and putting it in order. The air was cold. Biting. But I felt calm. The anger I should have felt. The white-hot rage. It wasn't there. It had been replaced by something else. Something cold and hard and clear. It was the click of a lock seating into place in my mind. The $5 bill was in my jeans pocket. I could feel its sharp corners. A cold piece of paper that represented the total value of my 23-year marriage. Then I heard it. The expensive, arrogant purr of her white BMW. Coming down the gravel driveway way too fast. A spray of rocks hit the workshop wall. The car door slammed. Hard enough to echo. I didn't move. I just kept wiping down a wrench. The workshop door flew open. Crashing against the wall. The sterile white light from the kitchen flooded in. Silhouetting her. "Kevin, what the hell was that?" Her voice was sharp. Accusatory. "You just walked out. You didn't even say anything. You embarrassed me." She was standing there, in her $900 dress, yelling at me about being embarrassed. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a handsaw. You embarrassed me. Kevin, in front of everyone, my clients, my colleagues. Joshua, what am I supposed to say to them? I slowly, deliberately, folded the oil rag and placed it on the workbench. I still hadn't looked at her. Are you listening to me? She shrieked. Her voice was climbing, getting that shrill, desperate edge. I'm talking to you. We have to talk about this. You can't just walk away from me like that. I finally turned. I didn't say a word. I just started walking past her, toward the house. My shoulder almost brushed hers, and she flinched. But I didn't touch her. I just moved her out of my way with my presence. I walked through the back door, into the kitchen. The house was spotless. Cold. It smelled like her perfume. An expensive, floral scent that always reminded me of hotel lobbies. She was right behind me, her heels clicking frantically on the hardwood. Kevin, stop ignoring me. This is not how we handle things. You're acting like a child. We need to communicate. I walked into our bedroom. I wasn't there to argue. I wasn't there to yell. I was there to see. To confirm. Kevin, she grabbed my arm. Stop. Look at me. We need to talk about this. You're overreacting. I stopped. My eyes landed on her nightstand. It was cluttered. Her expensive moisturizers. A half-empty glass of water. Her silk sleep mask. And something else. Something that didn't belong. It was a watch. A man's watch. Heavy. Stainless steel band. A dark blue face. I recognized it instantly. It was the one I'd seen on Joshua's wrist at the gallery. The one that flashed under the spotlights while he was gesturing. The one he was wearing when he reached into his pocket and pulled out that $5 bill. Melissa saw me looking. Her voice. Her tirade. Her entire body. Just stop. Mid-sentence. The silence in the room was sudden and total. All the air had been sucked out. The anger on her face didn't fade. It collapsed. It was replaced by a wave of pure, cold panic. Her eyes were wide. Her mouth slightly open. Oh, she said. Her voice was a tiny squeak. That... She was scrambling. I could see her mind racing. Trying to build a lie. That's Joshua's. He let me try it on. You know, at the party. It was so loud. I forgot to give it back. Forgot, I said. My voice sounded strange, distant. Yes, she said, nodding too fast. I just put it here when I got in. I was going to call him tomorrow. She was going with forgot. A $10,000 watch. A watch I'd seen him wearing not 5 hours ago. The lie was so bad. So clumsy. It was almost more insulting than the $5 bill. I kept looking at her. My gaze was flat. I felt nothing. Just observation. I slowly lifted my hand, not to touch her, not in anger. I just pointed. I pointed at her neck, just above the collar of her expensive silk blouse. And I suppose that's a curling iron burn. Her hand flew to her neck. A guilty, animal reflex. She couldn't have stopped it. It wasn't a burn. It was a bruise. A dark, ugly, purple-red mark. A signature. An animal marking its territory. Her face, which had been pale with panic, now flushed a deep, blotchy red. The lie about the watch was one thing. This was undeniable. Her mouth opened, then closed. She had nothing. The panic turned to desperation. Kevin, she whispered. Please, don't be like this. I turned away from her. I walked to the large walk-in closet, the one she'd had custom designed, the one that looked like a boutique. I reached up to the top shelf and pulled down a large, expensive suitcase. One of hers. I walked back into the bedroom and dropped it on the perfectly made bed. The thud of it landing on the comforter was the most final sound I'd ever heard. Kevin, what are you doing? Her voice was shaking now. Stop this. You're scaring me. We can talk about this. We can fix this. I turned to face her. Her makeup was starting to run. "You have 1 hour," I said. My voice was quiet. Not a yell. It was colder than the concrete floor of my workshop. What she whispered. 1 hour. Pack what you need for the next few weeks. Your lawyer can arrange a time to get the rest. Her face crumpled. You're kicking me out," she tried to find her anger again. "Hair authority. You can't do this. This is my house." 2. "Kevin, not anymore," I said. "I'm calling a locksmith at 8 a.m. The locks will be changed by noon. Be out before then." "Kevin." "No, please." I walked out of the bedroom. I left her standing there. Next to the open suitcase and the watch on the nightstand, I walked back to my workshop, stepped inside, and closed the door. The click of the deadbolt sliding into place was the only sound in the world. The next morning, I was in Brian's office at 9 a.m. sharp. Brian's office is old school, dark mahogany, leather-bound books that looked like they'd actually been read. A heavy desk you could land a helicopter on. Brian himself matched the room, 50s. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, and the quiet, dangerous patience of a man who absolutely hates cheaters and liars. He'd handled my business contracts for a decade. I told him everything. The party, the art gallery, the $5 bill, the watch, the hickey. I didn't yell. I didn't get emotional. I laid it out like I was describing a problem with a piece of wood. A split, a varp, a structural flaw. He listened, steepled his fingers, and nodded slowly. "She's sloppy. Kevin, that's good for us. But the humiliation, that's personal. The finance, that's business. We need to separate them to win both." He picked up his phone. "I'm bringing in Rachel. You'll like her." 10 minutes later, Rachel walked in. She was the opposite of the room. 30s. Sharp gray suit. Hair pulled back. And a tablet in her hand. She didn't look like an accountant. She looked like a codebreaker. She had the kind of eyes that could look at a spreadsheet and see a confession. Brian introduced her as a forensic accountant. Best in the city. She finds money people think has vanished. Rachel shook my hand. "Mr. Ashworth, I'm sorry for the circumstances. Let's get started. I need logins for everything. Joint accounts. Credit cards. Your business accounts." Her business accounts. "If you have access." I gave her everything. For the next hour, the only sound in the room was the quiet click, click, click of her keyboard and Brian's old-fashioned pen scratching on a legal pad. "She's been busy," Rachel said, not looking up. "The joint credit card is a mess. Dinners. Hotels." "I expected that," I said. "Yes, but she's been mixing it," Rachel said. She turned her tablet around. "Look, here's a charge for staging decor. $2,000. That's for her real estate business. Right looks legitimate." 2 days later, a charge for $750 at the Olympic Hotel. Not legitimate. Then a $500 client gift basket. Then a weekend at a spa. She's been hiding the affair inside her business expenses. Brian leaned forward. "So, she's sloppy. But she's not stupid. She's commingling." "Exactly," Rachel said. "And this is how it starts. Kevin." She looked at me, and her eyes were surprisingly kind, but clinical. "Right now, you're probably asking yourself how you didn't see this, how you could miss thousands of dollars." I just nodded. "You're not stupid," she said, tapping the screen. "You were trusting. And this is a classic boiling frog case of financial abuse. It didn't start at $100,000. It started small. It started 18 months ago." She pulled up a statement. "Look, a $100 dinner. You probably assumed it was a client. Then, a few weeks later, another one. Then she used the card for a consulting fee of $500. Small. Explainable things. You're busy running your own company. You're not checking line items for $100. You're looking at the total, and it's not high enough to set off alarms." She swiped. 6 months later, The charges are bigger. That $500 consulting fee is now $2,000. That client dinner is now a weekend hotel bill. The water was getting warmer, but so slowly you didn't notice you were being boiled. The boundary between our money, her business, and her affair didn't just break. She eroded it, grain by grain, until there was nothing left. My stomach felt hollow. She was right. I hadn't been stupid. I'd been a husband. I'd assumed the woman I'd built a life with wasn't systematically robbing me. So what's the total, Brian asked. Rachel's fingers flew. I'm tracing the transfers from the joint account now. It's not just credit cards. She's been making direct transfers to one single entity, an LLC. She paused. Okay, total transfers plus the verified personal spending. We're looking at just over $130,000 in the last 18 months. $130,000. The number just hung there in the air. A down payment on a house. 4 years of college. The price of 100 high-end dining tables. It was the price of my trust. Where did it go? I said. My voice was cold. An LLC. Rachel said. Registered in this state. J. Design Solutions. J. Joshua. The name felt like acid in my throat. He wasn't just sleeping with my wife. She was paying him for it. With my money, the humiliation from the gallery, the $5 bill. It all flashed in my head. But now it was different. It wasn't just an insult. It was a con. Can we prove it's him? Brian asked. Already on it, Rachel said, pulling the LLC registration. And got it. Principal owner. Sole proprietor. Joshua. Brian grinned. A thin, shark-like grin. That's it? Then, we've got her. Dissipation of marital assets. We'll claw back every penny. But Rachel hadn't stopped typing. She was frowning. What is it? I asked. This is weird, she said. This LLC. It's not just getting transfers from your joint account. It's also listed as an authorized vendor. A vendor, for who? She was digging, her face getting closer to the screen. A company called Artisan Design Consulting. That name mean anything to you? My blood went cold. I own it. I said, it's a subsidiary. I bought it 5 years ago. It handles interior design partnerships for my high-end furniture. Why? Rachel turned the tablet around. Her face was pale. Kevin. J. Design Solutions has been billing your subsidiary for client relations consulting for the last 18 months, to the tune of $60,000. I stared at the screen. The money wasn't just from our joint account. She hadn't just been paying him with my money. She'd been paying him through my company. Joshua was on my payroll. He was my employee. The man who'd looked at me like I was dirt. The man who'd tossed a $5 bill at me for being the help. The man who was sleeping with my wife. Was cashing my paychecks the entire time. I started to laugh. It was a quiet, strange, terrible sound. Brian and Rachel just stared at me. Kevin, Brian asked, looking genuinely concerned. Oh, we're going to do better than claw it back. Brian, I said. The laugh died, replaced by that same cold, beautiful clarity from the workshop. I looked at Brian. I need to call a meeting. The office for Artisan Design Consulting was in a different part of the city, one of those glass towers where the rent is higher than the air quality. I hadn't set foot in it for over a year. I trusted my management team to run it. I sent the email at 7 a.m. Mandatory Strategic Vendor Review. 10 a.m. Conference Room A. Attendance is compulsory. When I walked in at 9:50, the conference room was already buzzing with nervous energy. My subsidiary's management team, people who reported to a president, who ultimately reported to me, were all there. They looked terrified. The big boss showing up unannounced is never good news. I didn't say hello. I just walked to the head of the massive, polished table and sat down. I placed my leather-bound notebook in front of me. Inside the cover, in the breast pocket, was the folded $5 bill. The room went silent. They were all there. The head of finance, the operations manager, the lead designer, and, seated among them, was their star consultant, Joshua. He hadn't seen me yet. He was leaning back in his chair, looking relaxed, confident. He was wearing an expensive-looking gray suit, a crisp white shirt. No tie. He was quietly smirking at something the lead designer said, checking his phone. He looked like he owned the place. At precisely 10 a.m., I cleared my throat. The room snapped to attention. Joshua looked up from his phone. A bored, polite smile fixed on his face, ready for whatever boring manager was about to speak. His eyes met mine. It was a beautiful thing to watch. The smile didn't just fade, it froze, shattered, and fell off his face. The color. I've stripped old paint off a piece of furniture that had more life in it. He went from a healthy, arrogant tan to the color of old newspaper. His mouth opened slightly. He looked, for 1 second, like a fish that had just been dropped on a hot sidewalk. "Good morning," I said. My voice was calm, casual. It echoed in the silent room. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I'm Kevin Ashworth. For those of you who don't know, I'm the owner of this firm and its parent company, Ashworth Fine Carpentry." I let that hang in the air. Joshua looked like he was going to be sick. He was trying to recover, trying to sit up straight. But his body had betrayed him. He looked trapped. "I'm here today," I continued, "because I've been conducting a top-down review of our corporate ethics, our values, specifically regarding transparency, fiduciary responsibility, and conflicts of interest." I opened my notebook. I looked directly at Joshua. His eyes were wide, pleading. He was shaking his head, just slightly. A tiny. "Despérate, no. 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 We've discovered a significant billing irregularity," I said to the room. "It seems we've been paying a vendor, a consultant, for services that were never rendered. A substantial amount of money, over $130,000. The head of finance went pale. That's impossible. I approve all." "It is possible," I said, cutting him off. "When the fraud is being perpetrated in collusion with a member of my own family, you see, this consultant was intimately involved with my wife." The air in the room became unbreathable. Everyone was staring at me. No one dared to look at Joshua. "This consultant," I said, my voice still light, conversational, felt he was so untouchable that he could not only steal from my company, but that he could also publicly humiliate me. The man whose signature is, ultimately, on his paychecks. I reached into my notebook. I pulled out the neatly folded $5 bill. He attended a party with my wife. He saw me, the man who owns this company, and decided I was the help. He decided my value was $5. I leaned forward. I placed the bill on the polished table. With one finger, I flicked it. It slid, spinning slowly, across the glossy wood. It spun, and came to a perfect, silent stop right in front of Joshua's trembling hands. "I believe this is yours," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it carried to every corner of the room. "You gave it to me at the gallery. Consider it your severance." Joshua made a sound, a wet, choking sound. I, "Mr. Ashworth, I can explain." "Melissa." She said. "You're fired," I said. The conversational tone was gone, replaced by cold, flat steel. "We have a strict policy against fraud. We have an even stricter policy against employees who collude with a faithless spouse to steal $130,000 from the business that pays them. That's not just a conflict of interest, Joshua. That's grand larceny." He shot to his feet. His chair screeched backward. "You can't. This is a misunderstanding. You have no proof." I didn't even look at him. I nodded to the glass door of the conference room. 2 large security guards, who I had hired an hour ago and had been waiting in the hall. opened the door, and stepped inside. "Joshua," I said, "you are no longer associated with this company. These gentlemen will escort you to your desk, where you will retrieve your personal items. Then they will escort you from the building. If you are ever seen on this property again, you will be arrested for trespassing." "No. Wait. Please," he stammered, looking at the managers. At me. "Get him out," I said. "He didn't fight. He couldn't." All that arrogance, that slick confidence, was gone. He was just a terrified little man in an expensive suit. The guards each took an arm, and they marched him out of the room. He didn't even get to take his portfolio. The door clicked shut. I sat there, looking at the shell-shocked faces of my management team. I closed my notebook. "Well," I said, standing up, "it seems we have a job opening for a new design consultant. I'll let you all get on that." I walked out of the room, leaving the $5 bills sitting on the table. The courtroom was beige and empty. Beige room with bad lighting and a low ceiling. It smelled like stale coffee and cheap industrial carpet. Melissa sat across from me, next to her lawyer. She was wearing a conservative navy blue dress. She'd done her makeup to look tired. Fragile. The victim, she looked like a responsible, heartbroken woman who had been deeply wronged. She wouldn't look at me. She just stared at her hands, playing the part to the very end. Her lawyer, a man with a shiny suit and a loud voice, was in rare form. He was painting a masterpiece. I was a monster, a controlling, vindictive, and emotionally absent husband. I was financially abusive, holding my blue-collar success over her head, refusing to let her flourish. He claimed I had trapped her in the marriage and then, in a fit of rage, tyrannically and illegally locked her out of her own home. It was a beautiful story. I had to give him credit. Brian sat next to me, perfectly still. He let the other lawyer finish his entire performance. Then Brian stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't pace. He just stood there, buttoned his suit jacket, and addressed the judge. "Your Honor," he said, his voice calm and clear. "My colleague paints a very creative picture. We'd prefer to stick to the facts." He placed a single, thick binder on the judge's bench. "The fact is," Brian said, "Mrs. Ashworth wasn't trapped in this marriage. She was liquidating it. Over the last 18 months, Mrs. Ashworth systematically and fraudulently transferred $130,000 from the marital estate into a private, secret shell corporation." Melissa's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection. That's unsubstantiated." "It's very much substantiated, Your Honor," Brian continued, not even glancing at him. "In the binder, you will find copies of the bank statements, the transfer records, and the fraudulent invoices from the Shell LLC, Design Solutions, which, you will also see, is owned by a Mr. Joshua." The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, was already flipping through the binder. Her expression went from neutral to annoyed in about 30 seconds. But it gets worse. "Your Honor," Brian said. The judge looked up, her glasses perched on her nose. "You see," Brian said, "my client's wife didn't just bring him to that art gallery event to humiliate him. She brought him there as a cover. Mr. Joshua, the man she was funneling marital assets to, was not just her lover, he was, in fact, my client's employee. He was on Mr. Ashworth's payroll." The judge stopped flipping. She took her glasses off. "And here," Brian said, sliding another document across, "is the proof. Mrs. Ashworth was actively trying to poach this employee, Mr. Joshua, from her husband's subsidiary company to come work at her own real estate firm. This wasn't a crime of passion. Your Honor, this wasn't a simple, sad affair. This was a premeditated professional and financial betrayal. She wasn't just cheating on her husband. She was trying to cannibalize his business from the inside out." The courtroom was dead silent. Melissa looked like she'd been slapped. Her lawyer was shuffling papers, his face slick with sweat. He had nothing. The judge looked at Melissa. Her voice was cold. Mrs. Ashworth, is this true? Were you aware, Miss Joshua was your husband's employee when you were transferring $130,000 to his private account? Melissa opened her mouth. A small, squeaking sound came out. She looked at her lawyer. He was staring at the table. She said nothing. I'll take that as a yes, the judge said. The ruling was swift. It was a demolition. This court finds that Mrs. Ashworth has engaged in a calculated pattern of deceit and financial dissipation of marital assets. Therefore, I got the house. Full ownership. I got my business. Ashworth Fine Carpentry. Free and clear. I got the subsidiary. Artisan Design Consulting. Free and clear. The $130,000 she stole was ruled as fraudulent dissipation, and it would be deducted entirely from her share of the remaining, and now very small, marital estate, which, Brian had calculated, was now less than zero. She owed me money. The judge wasn't done. She put her glasses back on and looked at the final asset list. As for the remaining property, the judge said, Mrs. Ashworth will retain her personal effects, her clothing, and... She paused, squinting at the paper. 2006 Dodge Caravan. The judge looked up, which Mr. Ashworth's financials indicate he was planning to donate to charity last year. So, I guess you're saving him the paperwork. We're adjourned. The gavel cracked. Melissa just sat there. Her face was blank, her eyes wide. The sophisticated, high-status broker, the woman who couldn't stand to be embarrassed, she had just lost everything. For a beat-up minivan. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were filled with a kind of hatred I'd never seen. I didn't smile. I didn't scowl. I just stood up, buttoned my jacket, and walked out of the courtroom, leaving her to figure out how to get home. 6 months later, the workshop was quiet. Not an empty quiet, but a peaceful one. Spring had come. The big bay doors were rolled open, and the smell of fresh-cut cedar mixed with the scent of spring rain. My son, Ethan, was sweeping up a pile of sawdust. He was 18, taking a gap year before trade school, and he'd been apprenticing with me. He had good hands. He was quiet, focused. He'd seen the whole ugly mess, and he hadn't said much. But he'd just shown up every day. The business was thriving. The story, as it turned out, had gotten around. The tale of the artisan, the cheating wife, the employee, and the $5 bill, it had made me a quiet legend in certain circles. I was getting orders from all over the country. People didn't just want a table, they wanted a table from that guy. The guy who valued craft, the guy who wouldn't be humiliated. I was at my drafting table, sketching. Not a cabinet, not a table, a desk, a new design. Ethan came over, leaning on the table. What's that one? It's a new line, I said, pointing with my pencil. I'm calling it the Legacy Series. He looked at the sketch. Looks heavy, solid. That's the point, I said. I leaned back, looking around the workshop, at the stacks of wood, at the heavy tools, at my son. Your mother. She spent her whole life chasing reflections, I said, chasing status, trying to find her worth in what other people thought of her. But it's all temporary. It's smoke. It disappears the second the wind blows. I tapped the drafting table. This is real. You build something with your hands. You build it with integrity. You build it to last. I looked at him. That's the only legacy that matters. Ethan, status is temporary, but tangible craft. Real integrity. That lasts. It outlives you. He nodded, understanding. He went back to his sweeping. I turned back to my sketch. On the wall above my desk, hanging in a simple, clean frame I'd built myself, was that crumpled $5 bill, and right beneath it, I'd mounted a small, custom-engraved brass plaque. It didn't say anything about revenge. It didn't mention her. Or him. It just said, the cost of cheap. The value of craft. I took a deep breath. The smell of cedar and sawdust filling my lungs, and for the first time in 20 years, I felt completely free. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.